A new year of courts in session. Alongside Brielle Berry, I'm Luke Meli. Our third partner, Emily Cochran, is off today at the UCA National Championship.
It's a brand new anchor trio, and for the next few months, we'll be on the desk every Tuesday talking Temple basketball. But today, we're starting off with a Sunday home game for the men versus Memphis. The Owls came into this one at 4-1 in the AAC. Hasio Miller with the ball, dribbles baseline, kicks it out to Damian Dunn, who swings it to Caleb Battle. Dunn gets the ball back, pump fakes, drives down a lane, and knocks down the floater. He finished with 23 points. Owls' Jaleel White also had himself a nice game, finishing with 8 points and 11 boards. Temple's up by 7 in the second half. Memphis was led by DeAndre Williams, 20 points, and he also tallied 9 boards and 3 blocks. Guard Kendrick Davis also dropped 20 points on the day. In the final minute of the game, the Owls find themselves down 3. Nick Jourdain inbounds the ball to Dunn. Dunn dribbles up court and hands it off to Battle on the left wing. Battle's going to pass it back to Dunn, and he knocks down the 3, tying things up at 59 with 5 seconds left. And that, unfortunately, is enough time for this one. Davis gets the ball in the short corner and knocks down the jumper. Memphis wins 61-59.
No, he's a great player. Player of the year, got it going in the second half. So those are the sort of things that happen when you put yourself in those situations. I thought we followed the game plan. I thought the guys did a pretty good job defensively. Excuse me. I thought early on we just didn't read the game and what they were doing. They were switching a lot, and we just wasn't getting off the ball in a timely manner. We were just out of sorts throughout the game offensively.
Yes, Aaron McKee calls his offense out of sorts. Here are some numbers. The Owls shot 29% from the field and less than 14% from 3. The trio of Caleb Battle, Hasio Miller, and Zach Hicks, usually really reliable shooters, really struggled, going 1 for 23 combined from 3. That's probably not going to happen again, but it can't happen against Memphis. This would have been one of the better wins of the season for the Owls, probably just behind the Villanova and the Rutgers win. They hung in, but they weren't able to get it done. It's only the 5th time this season the Owls have scored less than 60 in a game.
So Luke, what I want to point out is besides the offensive struggles, Temple looked really good defensively. They held Memphis to just 61 points, which is the second lowest point total that they've scored in a game this season. And the Tigers are a team that averages just under 80 points per game. So I think for Temple to hold them to 61 defensively was very impressive and says a lot about the Owls defense, which is led by Jaleel White, Nick Jourdain, and other guys like that.
You're spot on. And this game against Memphis, the loss, marked the men's 19th game of the season. We've already seen a full season's worth of drama with the return of 2 all-conference players, a win over a ranked opponent, some overtime losses, and even some Twitter drama, all wrapped in a bow by a team with tournament or bust mentality.
Before the 2022-2023 season started, the Owls were slated to return Caleb Battle from injury, along with returning leading scorer Damian Dunn from last year's 17-12 team. The roster would likely be capable of taking 4th-year head coach Aaron McKee to his first NCAA tournament, despite the challenging schedule ahead. The Owls kicked off their season with 3 home games that started with a close loss to the Seahawks of Wagner, but with some drive after an opening season loss, the Owls managed to beat Villanova for the first time since 2012 during a huge Big 5 matchup. Shortly after, a game against Vanderbilt ended in not only a loss, but also a bad look for the team, with Battle only playing 19 minutes off the bench.
I just played the guys who I felt, wanted to be out there.
Battle's response on Twitter was a lone laughing face emoji. Battle soon deleted the tweet since then. Damian Dunn came into this next matchup against Rutgers leading the nation in scoring, averaging just under 30 points per game. Despite the Owls' hard-fought win, Damian Dunn's performances slowly sank throughout the rest of November and into the Empire Classic, where the Owls lost to St. John's and Richmond.
After being swept out of the Empire Classic, Aaron McKee knew the Owls had more work to do.
Too much up and down. We need more consistency.
With a Philly-heavy schedule on the horizon, Temple got more consistent. The Cherry and White beat Drexel, LaSalle, VCU, and St. Joe's to put together a 4-game winning streak. The final win in that stretch earned the Owls a share of the Big Five title for the first time since 2013. Temple fell by 20 to Penn with a chance to clinch sole possession of that title, and it also marked the first of 3 consecutive losses for the Cherry and White. But at that point in the season, losses weren't the only thing piling up. The injury bug struck Temple. A right thumb injury to center Jameel Reynolds would sideline him for 6 to 8 weeks. Then a concussion for Damian Dunn, the team's second leading scorer, would leave him on the sideline to end a tough non-conference schedule. The Owls limped into conference play, nursing a 3-game losing streak and some injuries to key starters.
As the Owls entered conference play against ECU, Damian Dunn still remained sidelined. Caleb Battle led all scorers with 18, leading the Owls to a 59-57 win. Temple traveled back home for a New Year's Day game against Cincinnati. The Owls won their second consecutive game, beating the Bearcats by 9. Temple had 5 players in double figures, with Battle and Jaleel White finishing with 14 each. Damian Dunn also returned for the Owls. Temple shot 14 for 15 from the free throw line.
At the end of practice, we were shooting free throws, some sort of competition behind it, just try to put them in an adverse situation.
The Owls look to win their 3rd straight game as they faced USF on the road. Dunn did not disappoint, scoring 19 points and leading the Owls to a 68-64 win. In its next 3 games, Temple went 1-2. That one win coming against Tulane. The Owls now sit at 4-2 in conference play.
It's time for our first break, but when we return, we'll talk some women's basketball.
And we will also bring on women's basketball head coach Diane Richardson. Stick with us.
Welcome back to Courts in Session. Over 3,000 in attendance for the women's basketball school day game against ECU last Wednesday. Early on, Bobby Smith is teaching a class in shooting, putting in 2 of her 7 points. Turnovers were the story of this one. The Pirates forced a season-high 25 Temple giveaways, which turned into 22 points. Here's an example. Off the steal, Smith catches beyond the arc and knocks down a 3, building a 10-point ECU lead at the half. In the 3rd quarter, Karanda Perea pulls down the miss, steps back, and knocks down a shot that snaps a 21-2 Pirates run to open the second half. And ECU didn't back off with a 27-point lead. Pirates leading scorer Danae McNeil in transition catches and hits a 3. She had a career-high 28 points. The Owls fall 72-51 and move to 2-2 in AAC play.
Earlier, we took a look at how the men's team has fared through 19 games. Now we round it off with the women. Let's take a look at how the women's team has looked after 16 games with a 7-9 record.
I look forward to this journey.
The women's basketball team made some changes at head coach during the offseason. They hired former Towson women's basketball head coach Diane Richardson. In the preseason AAC rankings, the Owls were predicted to finish 7th out of 11 teams in the conference. Richardson had a handful of players follow her from Towson to North Broad, such as Aaliyah Nelson, Terry Onagary, and Rain Tucker. The Owls opened their season on the road against Princeton, where the Tigers came out on top 67-49. They followed that loss with a 17-point win against Georgetown. Temple went on to lose its next 3 games, dropping its record to 1-4. Temple looked to snap its losing streak when they played Bucknell. The Owls were led by Aaliyah Nelson's 23 points, followed by Jaisha Clinton, who dropped 17. As a team, they shot 60% from beyond the arc. Temple continued its 3-game road trip as they took on Old Dominion, where the Owls looked to win 2 in a row.
After a loss to Old Dominion in the Ann Donovan Classic, the Owls went on a 2-game win streak against UMBC and LaSalle before taking 6 days off to complete the Big 5 circuit at Penn. A loss to the Quakers would soon lead to a huge win against Duquesne, where point guard Aaliyah Nelson joined the 1,000-point club, becoming the 26th Owl in program history to do so. Nelson led both teams with 33 points, and with that success, she earned AAC and Big 5 Player of the Week. Back on their own home court for the rest of December gameplay, the Owls lost by 20 to the Rebels of Ole Miss. The SEC opponent had 2 players with double-doubles, Madison Scott and Angel Baker. These 2 made it difficult for the Owls to creep up. With no momentum heading into conference play, it seemed beneficial for the Owls to have 8 days off before the Memphis Tigers came to Philadelphia.
And that 8-day break paid off. The Owls started conference play with a dominant 80-69 win over Memphis. The win was a sign that the Cherry and White's non-conference schedule, at one point the 19th toughest in the nation, was working as Coach Richardson intended.
Yeah, and that was strategic on our part. I knew that, if we face some tough competition, that will prepare us for the American, because the American is tough.
The winning ways came to a halt against conference powerhouse USF, with the Owls falling to the Bulls 77-55 in Tampa, Florida. But again, Coach Richardson's self-proclaimed resilient group responded with a road win against Cincinnati behind Jaisha Clinton's career-high 28 points. Clinton's performance in a tight road win was one of the best examples of Diane Richardson's equal opportunity offense. Temple had a chance to build on the win and get back to 500 overall, with over 2,000 kids in attendance for the school day game at the Liacouras Center against ECU. Instead, the Pirates turned Temple over 25 times in an impressive 72-51 ECU win. With the loss, the Owls sit at 7-9 overall and are 2-2 in AAC play.
This is a time of transition for the women's team. When I tell you the Owls are 16 games into the season, they are really 16 games into the Diane Richardson era.
And as luck would have it, Coach Richardson is here with us on set. Thank you so much for coming on, Coach.
I'm glad to be here.
So, Coach, I'm going to get things started. My question for you is, where have you seen the most growth from your team from the beginning of the season compared to now?
I think our defense, we're starting to play team defense. And, it was a mixture of players coming in, and so we're finally trying to figure things out on the defensive end.
And now I have to ask about Aaliyah Nelson. She came over with you from Towson, currently leads this team in scoring. What does she bring to the table? What's your relationship like with her? And tell me about your reaction when she decided she was coming with you.
Yeah, well, I've known her since she was 9, so I've watched her kind of grow in this game. She's exciting, a ball of energy, and she's a leader on and off the court. So when she decided to come to Temple, we were elated because she had some offers from some pretty big teams.
And so what has surprised you most about your time at Temple so far?
Well, it's an awesome place, that's for sure. And the people are awesome. And people believe in our sports. And so that's really welcoming for us. And the support has been great. So I'm loving it here.
And Coach, you've won at every level. You've won in high school, you've won in college. Now coming over to Temple, this is a program that hasn't won 20 games since 2017. What do you think it takes to make a winner, and how are you expecting to do that here?
Well, we're going to dig in deep, and everybody's going to work toward winning. And we're changing the mentality to be a championship mentality so that we expect to win. And so we're going to work hard for each other.
And another question that I have, so what are your predictions for tonight's game? What are the keys to your team getting a win tonight, offensively, defensively?
Yeah, well, Tulsa's a very tough team. They lead the country in three-point shot attempts, so we've got to run them off the line. We've got to contest every shot and be there on the catch so that they don't get any open looks. And then we've got to play Temple defense.
And we mentioned before that you had some players come with you from Towson, but there were some players that were still here from Temple. Has anyone stood out to you or maybe played better than maybe you knew them before when you got here to Temple?
Yeah, Tiara East, she's done a great job. Again, coming into her sophomore year, she's more confident in her shot, more confident in getting to the basket, and she leads us in rebounds right now. So we're really excited about what she can do for us.
All right, Coach, thank you so much for coming on. We appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Go Owls.
Go Owls. It's time for another break. Coming up, we'll dive into the AAC standings and take a look at where the Owls currently sit.
When we come back, Luke and I will break down some plays from both the men's and women's teams.
Welcome back to Courts in Session. We're just beyond the halfway point in the college basketball season, so we can see where teams are starting to settle in. And we'll start with the women, where the Owls sit in 6th place, right around that midpoint mark where the preseason poll placed the Owls in 7th. When we look at the rest of the AAC, there's a very familiar team at the top.
I'm going to talk about that familiar team, and that is the University of South Florida. the Bulls have been dominating in the American this season, sitting at 5-0 so far. And overall, the team is 16-4, not to mention they're undefeated at home. The Bulls' leading scorer is Elena Taneke, who's averaging just over 17 points per game. The team also has two other players averaging double figures in Sammy Puisis and Dulce Fanca-Mengiado. And each of USF's losses have come against ranked opponents such as Villanova, Michigan, NC State, and Ohio State.
You know, the Bulls are a powerhouse, but it feels like they're always at the top of the standings. I want to focus on a team that's exceeding expectations, the ECU Pirates. The Pirates were picked to finish last in the preseason poll, but thanks to their elite defense, which forces over 26 turnovers per game, they've jumped to 5th in the conference. Offensively, they're led by Danae McNeil. She averages over 16 a game, and as we saw earlier, had her career-high 28 against Temple earlier this season.
And now to men's basketball. Temple's currently sitting at 5th in conference rankings, which is also where they were predicted to finish in the preseason polls. But it's no surprise as to who is at the top of the American.
Now, when the American has the top team in the entire country, we have to talk about them. The #1 ranked Houston Cougars are a scorching 17-1 overall and 5-0 in conference, and they've done it with their defense. The Cougars have the top scoring defense in the country, allowing less than 53 points per game. That's out of 352 D1 teams. They are at the top. On offense, senior guard Marcus Sasser leads the way, averaging over 16 points per game. Last season, he was taken out by a foot injury. That stopped his season halfway short. His return this year has been crucial and has vaulted them right to the top.
Okay, Luke, so I do love your Houston pick. It's great, but another team that I have my eye on is Tulane. They're sitting below Houston in conference standings with a 5-1 record in the American, but the team has 4 players averaging double figures. But the one guy that I have my eye on is Jalen Forbes. Forbes is shooting 39% from 3 and has made 45 threes on the season. The Green Wave is riding a 5-game win streak, and Luke, Houston and Tulane play tonight.
You can ride the Green Wave. I'm going with the Cougars all the way. But we've seen now where the men and women stack up in the standings. Now it's time to look at some of their recent trends on the court. Brielle and I have picked some plays that sort of define some of the trends of the season for both teams so far.
Okay, so let's start with the men. Aaron McKee's squad is 10-9 on the season, and I think a lot of the struggles come from the lack of offensive production, as we mentioned before. As a team, the Owls are shooting just 42% from the field, which ranks 288th out of 352 NCAA Division I teams. They do have some great defenders in Jaleel White and Nick Jourdain, but let's take a look at this play. Hostia Miller is going to shoot this ball at the top of the key. The only guy who goes in for the rebound is Jaleel White. So those guys need to crash the boards offensively. If you look here, they make one pass to Zach Hicks and one pass to Hostia Miller, and they're already chucking up shots when they're only down by 11 points. So they just need to make better decisions offensively.
It's definitely a quick shot for sure. Now let's go over to the women, a team that needs to get more shots up. They have a turnover problem right now. This team has struggled in their losses, over 17 turnovers per game in the losses. That number drops to 14 when they win. Let's go back to the game that was most recent that we talked about. ECU, the Owls turned it over a season-high 25 times in this game. So you can play it right here. The Owls working against a 3-2 zone. Tiara East gets it at the elbow. The open spot on the 3-2 is the corners. You can stop it right there. When Jaisha Clinton catches it on the far side, the opening is the corner. That's where Tariana Gary, one of Temple's best three-point shooters, is standing wide open in the corner. The defender on the top on the outside committed to Clinton. The pass was there. The defender down low is boxed out by Denise Solis. So really, the opening was there. That's where the Owls got to go. You can play it right here. Instead, Clinton drives into some traffic, loses the ball. 1 of 25 turnovers again for the Owls. So now you can pause it right here. The Owls are going against this 3-2 again. And before Tiara East went to throw this pass, Courtney Wilson is now in the corner wide open, again going against this 3-2 zone. And it's not a zone that the Owls are going to face every single game. We know that. This is just a couple of examples from one game. But with the stats I mentioned before, the turnovers have been a problem. If the Owls can sort of get that going, they shoot really well from the field. They just got to get those shots up, and the turnovers are preventing that. They're going to try and stop that tonight against Tulsa.
Great point, Luke. But we're up against our final break of the day. When we come back, we will discuss what we've seen from the men's teams through 19 games.
We'll also make our predictions for the women's basketball team's matchup against Tulane when Courts in Session returns.
Welcome back to Courts in Session. Time to discuss what the season has looked like for the men's basketball team. We want to be careful starting off with the cup is half empty, but Luke, what do you see as the biggest inconsistencies?
The biggest inconsistency for me is the health at the center position. That's Jameel Reynolds. Jameel came in this season. He played the first 11 games before going down with his right thumb injury. He's been out since then, supposed to miss 6 to 8 weeks. We're about 4 or 5 weeks through that timeline. He had been averaging over 11 points per game and 6.3 rebounds per game on 60% shooting, and he also changed the style of this team. This is the first time in the Aaron McKee era that the Owls had a big man they could go to in the post and they could rely on. Now stepping in for him has been Korjan Kuch. He's averaging less than 2 points per game. He's been fine, but this is just not the role he's expected to play. He's not a go-to scorer down low, so that's the biggest inconsistency for me.
Good point, Luke. So what I'm going to talk about is what I talked about earlier. The Owls' biggest issue is they cannot close down games going down the stretch. Let's use Sunday's game against Memphis as an example. The Owls were up by 9 with 8 minutes to go, and they just weren't able to get it done offensively. Defensively, they looked fine, but they go in these scoring droughts where they don't score, and ultimately it hurts them, and they can't close out those close games.
All right, let's move over to the women now. We know there's a new coach, a whole brand new group of players. What's one of the biggest differences you've seen from last year's team to this year's team?
So I'm going to go with Diane Richardson was saying Tiara East is the player that I have my eyes on. She's doubled her scoring average this year, 7 points per game compared to 3 last year. And just like Diane said, defensively and offensively, she's been rebounding. She's their leading rebounder, averaging just about 6 per game compared to 2 last season. So there's been a ton of growth there from East.
She's been fantastic, and she's one of the biggest beneficiaries of the equal opportunity offense that Diane Richardson brought in. Last year, they all relied on Mia Davis averaging 19 a game. Now they have 3 scores in double figures this season. And the Owls will be back in action tonight when they take on the Golden Hurricane. And the Golden Hurricane bring a lot to the table.
Yes, they do, Luke. So who do you predict to win the game tonight?
I've got the Golden Hurricane. I think they have the top-ranked offense in the conference, averaging over 75 points per game. And now over on the Temple side, they're last in points allowed defensively. So I think it's going to be a Golden Hurricane win. They'll keep up their winning streak.
I'm agreeing with you, Luke. I have Tulsa winning this one by double digits. But like you said, this could be that marquee win for them. But ultimately, I just don't think they're going to be able to get it done.
It's going to be close, and you know, the Owls coming off that loss. Let's look at some key matchups. Aaliyah Nelson, only 2 points last game, her season low. I'd expect her to play a lot better. I know Diane Richardson has that connection with her, as she mentioned to us. Aaliyah has, every time she scored in single digits this season, she's followed it up with a double-digit scoring game. So if anyone is going to step up in a game like this, probably the biggest of the season for the Owls, it's going to be Aaliyah Nelson.
And the Owls are going to play competitively because it is that conference game. So I'm expecting Tiara East and Aaliyah Nelson to both have big games tonight. And that is all the time we have for our very first episode of Courts in Session.
We'll see you same time, same place next week, and we'll add our third anchor to the mix with Emily Cochran coming back to the desk with us. For Brielle Berry, I'm Luke Meli. Have a great day, everyone.